I was going to go through the title. So there's one, of course, is the machine learning infrastructure role, right, which is not just looking at the LLM scaling is an example for machine learning infrastructure role. There's also the data engineer role, which comes really close, right? So you think about streaming-based models, right? So as and when in the knowledge graph team, as and when we make a profile update, we have a nearline processor processing and doing ATK resolution on top, right? So that requires communicating with the model cloud, or in this case, you can think of a SageMaker, where you're holding the model, infer the recommendations. Similarly, there's a candidate generator, right, which is essentially a hosted search or some sort of a search index. That search index can now be powered through either basic index-based traditional indexes, or you can have LLM-based indexes, or you can have embeddings-based indexes. Those are all still need a lot of search knowledge, right, and search backend knowledge, for example, but also data engineering, right, because the data flows through the whole process. So knowing the whole end-to-end data pipeline. So data engineering is also one very common one. Data science, and there's a small difference between data science and experimentation. So you could be a data scientist, but even if you're a statistician, you could still have a lot of understanding of how experiments are set up, right? How to not have confounding results happening from an experiment. How not one experiment can cannibalize the other one. How do you split your treatments so that that requires a lot of statistical knowledge, and it's different than a data science role. So if somebody who has a statistics background and out of school, they still can find a role in the industry close to their ML as well. So data science and ML is one part, as definitely, and within ML as well, there is an ML generalist or an applied ML scientist role. Then there is also a more domain expert role. So let's say that you have 7 years of experience literally just doing entity resolution. You can still be an expert, domain expert in the company doing that. Of course, that proportion is very small, but still that exists today, right? So data science and ML are just two roles, but there's data engineer, there's experimentation, which is statisticians, data scientists, of course, and of course, like people who have years of experience in search and backend and like real-time model training, real-time model inference. Those type of things also are very valuable, and that does not require a lot of ML knowledge either.
So then let me ask the additional question. Like, whenever you're interviewing people or when you're looking at profiles, there are many people who today don't have production ML experience. They have academic ML experience. They come from search backgrounds, they come from storage backgrounds, from relevant backgrounds, stats backgrounds, data engineering backgrounds. So good relevant backgrounds, but with academic ML knowledge. How do you perceive that? And if there are any tips on how to embellish that to say that this is relevant? How do you think about those?
So I think that the academic knowledge is going to be very useful, and it gets you almost all the way there. But what is really key is to have some record of practice in terms of utilizing these things. So it's actually quite easy these days to be able to do that. There's a lot of open source machine learning and AI out there. So just basically having some proof of concept, maybe even creating your own open source models or something like that, is a great way to showcase this. And then interviews tend to dive into the practice as well as the theory. So that's where you'll get you'll get used to using things like PyTorch, which will help a lot in interviews.
I can add my own experience here, because when I was graduating, right, I had only a couple of internship experience. So how I can make myself more relevant for industry once I'm switching after spending 90% of my time in career, right? So what I did is kind of going into a bootcamp, right, which allow exactly what Ujjwal mentioned, create a Shiny app or Heroku-based app,